Okay, and so for the notes for tides, you have this outline. The first thing we typically want to do with any new term is define it. So a tide is the daily rise and fall of Earth's waters on its coastlines. And I'm getting most of this information from your Earth's Waters book, just so you know where it's coming from. There are two types of tides. There's high tide and low tide. High tide makes sense is the highest point of the tide, when the water is the highest at the water's coastline. And then low tide is just the opposite. It's when the water is at its lowest point. Let me put the word point up here. Tides happen regularly. You can actually time them and you can figure out when they are going to occur and predict them. And they are not dependent on wind. So the first question I asked you for this whole beginning unit was what things can move water? Well, we know that wind moves water, and we know that wind is caused by the uneven heating of the Earth's surface by the sun. So in a way, the sun moves water through wind. But what causes the tides? Well, the tides are caused by an interaction between or of the Earth, the moon, and the sun. That's what causes the tides. Really, it's a matter of gravity. Okay, gravity, you'll learn more about this in 8th grade science, but it's the force between two objects pulling them toward each other. Every object that has mass has a gravitational pull on another object. So the more mass an object has, the more gravitational pull it has. And you'd think the sun would have a greater gravitational pull on the Earth than the moon, but the sun is so far away because gravity decreases as distance increases. So the sun is so much more further away than the moon that its gravitational pull is, I think, about a half of what the pull of the moon is. So when the moon and the sun and the Earth are interacting with each other, basically the gravitational pull of the moon is pulling on the Earth toward the moon. Well, the Earth also pulls back on the moon. The Earth does move, but the waters of the Earth aren't stationary. They aren't fixed in place. So they are pulled, and that's called a tidal bulge. So the water on the side of the Earth facing the moon has high tide. And the Earth is also pulled. And the water on the other side of the Earth is kind of like left behind and causes a bulge on the other side. If you watch the video that I linked with this, it gives a great graphic of what that looks like. So water on the side of the Earth not facing the moon also has a high tide, and again they call that a tidal bulge. Well, the low tides then are those places in the middle. As the water is pulled toward the moon, and then as the water is kind of left behind on the other side, it thins out in the middle. Now, some students, you guys seemed kind of confused about how the sun plays a part in that. I asked yesterday about how does the sun play a part in daily tides and the two tides. You have to remember the Earth is spinning, okay? So the Earth is constantly rotating. So at one point, let's say here in the Sylvania area, we are facing the sun, okay? We're turned toward it, it's our daytime. Well, then we're on that far side. We're not facing the moon, we're on the far side in the bulge when we're not facing the moon. Okay, And then when we're rotated back around toward the moon, we're on the side that is facing the moon. And so we're at the tidal bulge facing the moon. Well, all that time, the sun still has a gravitational pull on the Earth. So the sun is either contributing to those tides, meaning making them higher tidal range, a higher high tide and a lower low tide, or they're kind of taking away from the tide. And that does have to do with the spring tides and the neap tides, but the sun is always adding or taking away from the moon's pull, just dependent on where the sun and the moon and the earth are as far as alignment. So the sun on the daily tides is contributing to it or taking away to both of the tides. Keep that in mind. That's really what I was looking for in the answer to that question. So now that's the section of notes for today, just this first section. We'll get more into spring tides and neap tides and fill in that information later on in the week. All right, so please make sure you watch the video, and then the next piece of the assignment is looking at predicting tides. Why is it important? Why do we care? Well, watch the time-lapse video and you'll really see why we should care about our ability to predict the tides.